Welcome, everyone. I'm just delighted to have you virtually with me today. I am Amale Andraos, the Dean of Columbia's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. Very, very sort of grateful that you're joining me to speak about the school. Obviously, it would have been much more wonderful to have you in person. But I am hopeful that that if you join us, you will be able to be with us physically. I'm really looking forward to that moment of being together. This is Avery Hall, which, if you were with us today, you would be visiting this beautiful building, but by McKim, Mead and White architects. And this is our home, although we have kind of are now occupying other buildings on campus, but it's just Columbia itself is a wonderful sort of campus in the middle of New York, and that connection is really crucial to who we are as a school. I like to think about our school as one that is dedicated to the scales of engagement, from the scale of the brick and preservation to the scale of large-scale thinking in urban planning and in real estate development, and how we sort of engage with the issues of our time is really at the heart of GSAPP's focus across all of our programs. So, as I said, from a very large scale of kind of urban design and urban planning to the scale of reinventing materials when you think about preservation or architecture and design, as well as bringing kind of critical approach to thinking about issues of aesthetics and materiality and how we engage climate and other. And, you know, another way to think about the school is as I call it, the urban condenser of ideas. So many people, so many faculty, students, and other coming from around the world with very different perspectives. And this kind of encounter really supports a sort of process by which we advance the disciplines and the practices, kind of engaging in rethinking curriculum and pedagogy and new forms of pedagogy and new approaches to research as well, that are really about how we change practice as well as how we produce new forms of scholarship. And that, you know, all of that is a kind of in a constant feedback loop. And you will find that many of our students and our faculty are hybrids that are really bridging all these different approaches to how we think about architecture and the disciplines of the built environment. Some of the ideas that we're really focused on, and we have been over the past years, are ideas around climate and climate change and how we address climate change in the built environment, ideas about equity, social equity, racial equity, and ideas about how data and design are really crucial at this moment to understand in order for us to kind of think about the built environment in new ways. So thinking about climate, you can, if you go on our website, you'll see a kind of archive of all of the conversations, events, courses, etc., that have been organized over the years to address the issue of climate across all of the disciplines. It's really central to our teaching, to students' work, from, you know, our students kind of imagining new forms of living in the city, and, you know, the whole spectrum, both living in terms of design, but also in terms of how we organize ourselves together as kind of new forms of collectives. When we think about infrastructures and urban design and issues of resiliency, when we think about sort of planning for those questions of resiliency and how that kind of overlaps with issues of equity and kind of income diversity across neighborhoods. And, you know, from this kind of large scale thinking to thinking about the building scale, thinking about very sort of almost pragmatic issues of energy and construction, and bringing you know, kind of very tangible approaches to climate change at the scale of the building, at the scale of materiality, at the scale of labor as well, to think about sort of constantly moving from the scale of the building to the neighborhood and then beyond, and kind of bringing design into all of this. And it's not just, you know, addressing climate is not issue only of technology. It's, as I said, all these issues are really kind of come together in architecture and in built form, and dissecting them is kind of really crucial. And finding the right scale to engage with them. Is it the scale of building? Is it the scale of the body? And I think our students really are wonderful at thinking through all these questions through architecture, through planning, also through preservation, looking back at the past and seeing how issues of climate change is also changing how we understand our cities of the past and how we imagine a future for them as well. And the imagination is broad in terms of approaching different materials, engaging with issues of real estate, and always being connected with the city outside our walls and beyond, and having students kind of constantly sort of interact with the reality of being an architect, being a planner, being a critic or a curator, a developer, or an urban designer, or a preservationist out in the world. And so here you see some images of our students in different contexts, kind of connecting what they learn at school with the outside world, let's say. And we have many sort of opportunities. There have been many opportunities where these issues of climate have come together across studios, across courses, so that they really became a kind of focus for the school as a whole. This is the Green New Deal super studio, which is currently led by the Urban Design Program. You can find also a record of the first iteration that was a collaboration between GSAPP and the Buell Center that also invited a number of studios from across the different programs to come together to address the question of the Green New Deal and its potential for architecture and the disciplines of the built environment. We also, I think, when it comes to these issues of climate equity and data and design, and this loop that I showed of finding a way to connect pedagogy to practice to research. Many of our research centers and labs and initiatives are intimately connected with pedagogy at the school. For example, the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, which is directed by Professor Kate Orff, has a sort of very direct relationship to the pedagogy of the urban design studio. And so there's a kind of feedback loop between what is done in the program and what is done in the center. And that is the case for all of our centers or labs, such as Malo Hudson's Urban Community and Health Equity Lab, which is very much connected to urban planning and to issues of materiality, etc. So that kind of connection between you as students at the school and then the research of the faculty and what's happening in the research centers and labs and initiatives is something that is increasingly interconnected. This is a project by Professor David Benjamin, who has been leading the Embodied Energy Initiative at the school and did this project with research students who were research assistants. And this was a project for MoMA, the new MoMA, the new Museum of Modern Art, Midtown in New York. And the museum had asked David and the team to think about the materials that were used in the construction of the expansion and what was the embodied energy of that construction. So there is a new lab now as well, led by Professor Lola Benalon, who now leads the sequence, the technology sequence in architecture, and it's really focusing on the scale of materials and natural materials as well. And if you're interested in that line of research, you can listen to the podcast conversations that she's been hosting on natural materials. And this is something that is now growing in terms of the curriculum itself. Another way to recognize student work that is focused on issues of climate is through the Buell Prize, which was launched a number of years ago, and kind of is a recognition for any project of a student from any of the programs who addresses the Paris Climate Accord. The second, and not second in importance, rather maybe first, but certainly as you know, all these issues are really intersectional and intersect in the way that we teach and come together to think about architecture and the built environment is the issue of equity. Here too on our website, you can see the kind of archive of work and conversations that focused on issues of equity, both in the US and around the world. You can also read the GSAPP Anti-Racism Action Plan. We're very excited to be in the kind of implementation phase now with a number of initiatives that will come into play before the end of the summer. The Common Circle, for example, is a course we're working on, which will be, a part of your orientation when you come in, and just wonderful ways, important ways, crucial ways to sort of empower all of us to speak better, act better, participate better, and imagine a more equitable act towards a more racially and socially equitable sort of world as we grow into our roles as architects, planners, and other. Our faculty is really very much leading these conversations. Professor Mabel Wilson, who will be giving the open house evening lecture, which I hope you will attend, has curated a show with Sean Anderson at the MoMA called Reconstructions, looking at the intersection of Blackness in America and architecture. And it's just an amazing show with just outstanding work. Many of our alumni and professors are part of this show. Mario Gooden, who is currently the director of Advanced Studios, is featured in the show. Emmanuel Admasu is one of our new faculty who will be joining in July. And we're really also thrilled to have Amanda Williams teaching with one of our PhD graduates, Ife Vanable, this spring as well. And so, this connection between the school and institutions and advancing these issues in architecture is very strong. And actually, the Black Reconstruction Collective launched or were invited at GSAPP as one of our first events last fall, hosted by the Black Student Alliance at GSAPP. And it was just an amazing conversation about how we sort of really kind of decenter and reshift and refocus and recenter the field around issues of Blackness in the country, but also beyond. These issues and questions are not just central to architecture, they're obviously central to historic preservation, tremendous moment of introspection in terms of looking at monuments and discussing the past and how it's kind of recast today in different ways, analyzing kind of physical singular monuments, but also entire neighborhoods as well. This was the Torquaze Dyson is also currently a faculty teaching with Mario Gooden, and had a wonderful exhibition at Ross Gallery called 1919 Blackwater Exhibition, kind of also looking at these issues historically. The question of equity is also a question very much of representation. Whether it's racial and social and ethnic representation, or issues of labor, such as the work that Anna Pujaner is doing with her kitchen stories, and how women's relationship to kitchens in Asia, and was kind of the focus of one of her studios. Professor Zia Jamaluddin is looking at the history and of a representation of the mosque, both in North Africa and in the Middle East. Professor Hilary Sample is looking at women in writing and how we can increase women's voices in sort of the curriculum and syllabi across the disciplines of the built environment. Also issues of representation in terms of how we think of quote unquote nature. And this was another amazing show at Ross Gallery by Cooking Sections, which kind of told the stories of all these trees and tree trunks. And this crosses really from architecture and design and studio and exhibitions to also history theory, sort of rethinking. This is work that led by many of our faculty and Professor Reinhold Martin in particular, kind of questioning the canon and globalizing it, decentering it, kind of increasing the archive of sort of precedents from around the world, and to create, again, a different kind of feedback loop where many of our faculty and also students are producing new knowledge and books that are now in conversation with the hundreds and hundreds of books in every library that constitute still a sort of centering of the field. And these questions, expand from the studio, from the curriculum to events. This was an amazing event, if you have a chance to look at it, called Planning Futures on Decolonial, Postcolonial, and Abolitionist Planning, led by Hibabu Akkar. We had, I think there are now 2,400 views on YouTube, and just a fantastic series of speakers that came together from around the world to think about the future of planning. And then more locally, Malo Hudson engaged in thinking about the relationship of the university to its neighboring community in Harlem and beyond, and thinking about questions of repair. And again, as I mentioned, for climate, our centers are very engaged in these questions as well, such as the Center for Spatial Research that has been developing maps of politics of care, the Buell Center, which is looking at architecture and engineering sort of firms and practices and their sort of footprint, let's say, on issues of infrastructure in the world, and the Housing Lab, which is student-run and has been just amazing at, kind of centering the question of housing in relation to issues of segregation and histories of segregation in the US, and inviting the students from across the programs to contribute to that thinking, including a real estate program, planning, preservation, etc. And they're really putting forth ideas of how to sort of partner with certain communities and community organizations and propose new approaches to housing. And this is really a long sort of, let's say, legacy of expertise at the school. We're very proud that the housing has been at the heart of many of our programs, especially the MARC program for decades now. Great expertise amongst our faculty, from Lance Freeman to Richard Plunz and Hilary Sample, amongst other, and not only in terms of scholarship, but also in terms of practice around the world, looking at new forms of housing, new forms of affordable housing, public housing, etc. And this engagement with this issue of housing, both in New York and in the US, but also abroad, and tying always the thinking relationally, has been at the center of the housing studio for the MARCs in particular, who have often traveled to another city and then come back and done a project in New York in this kind of relational thinking between the two. And here are some of the projects of our students from the housing studio in recent years. And the last, or the third topic of sort of focus, is the question of data and design. I think GSAPP has also a very long history of sort of being at the cutting edge of thinking critically and engaging with technology, and issues of visualization, making, etc., are still sort of at the heart of what we do here at the school. And so from, the maker space and rethinking making and fabrication, which I'm happy to say is not the purview of kind of a small clique of students who are cool and in, but it really kind of cuts across all the programs and is just an incredible place of coming together at the school, a place where students came together for COVID to make shields, as did in many schools, and that reinforced this kind of network of making across the university, and tying this physical world, and we're still attached to making physically, to the digital world, and looking at geometries and transition and imagination and making, with always the sense of thinking about issues of recycling, of embodied energy, etc., and bringing all these things together. And often a moment of celebration, of end of year show on campus, where students get to show off what they made during the year. And as I mentioned, it's not just the purview of our architecture students. We have just brilliant makers across all the programs, including our faculty. This is Professor Leah Meisterlin in planning. And we've held a number of workshops abroad as well, including with the ITIHA, for example, 2 years ago, and it's something that we're kind of continuously looking to enhance moving forward. Technology is also about making videos and thinking about new media for students to represent their work, to talk about their work, to think about it, to understand issues of BIM and technology. And there's always a connection between the sort of very technical expertise that students are learning with the playfulness that we welcome. And if you have a chance, you can visit the GSAPP Skill Trails, which is a kind of amazing network of short videos and tutorials, etc., for learning how to script and make so all sorts of things. And this is open source and will be the sort of foundation somewhat of the new program that we'll be launching next year, so not this year, called Computational Design Practices, which really build on the school's expertise. Here I'm just showing some of the great work that our students did, in COVID time last spring, finding new ways to present their work, to come together. And I think that kind of door of incredible imagination and new ways of making digitally is something that will carry through as well today. And hopefully when you're here in the summer and in the fall. So these things are not just happening in isolation at the school on your screen. We always try to also invite opportunities for them to become interventions in the city, and again to tie with the research that happens in the center, and then to tie the centers and the labs together. For instance, the maker space is a few floors below the historic preservation technology lab, which has become an amazing space of experimentation to rethink preservation and questions of history and materials, and then taking that research out into the city and finding ways to really use technology and data to rethink how we approach historical buildings and how we decide on how to intervene in them. And so, all of these kind of issues and questions and this context that we're creating here at GSAPP is really an invitation for you as students to take positions. We always get at the open house the question of, what programs have a thesis and what don't. Those that do have a thesis are urban planning and historic preservation and CCCP, and those that don't are, the MARC, the AED, and the urban design program, as well as the real estate that have the capstone. For the MARC and the urban design and the AED, it's really, the thesis is really your portfolio and your writing that comes together, and you can see some of the work on the web. And it's really a moment of sort of, students design a little bit their trajectory as they choose studio faculty, as they choose courses, etc., and really comes together in this book that is sort of presented at the end to faculty and is kind of awarded, etc. And just for fun, I did want to show this project that was launched at the beginning of this spring to design a new a little pavilion that hopefully will be built in the summer. So for those of you who will join the summer, it's still kind of cooking, but we did a charrette across the advanced studios to come up with ideas for what a pavilion would be. And I'm showing this because increasingly, and maybe as a result of this kind of remote moment, the intensification of collaborations across the different studios and across the different programs definitely is kind of leading us in new forms of conversations. You can also check out the end of year show, last year's and also the one that will come at the end of April. School life. So this is our school life now, as some of you who are currently in school know. We have managed, though, to have a hybrid experience both at GSAPP and elsewhere. For instance, in Shanghai, we've worked with the Global Center there, the Columbia Global Center, to have many of our students at one of the WeWorks there, etc. So finding a way is always to hybridize the two and to stay connected has been very important. And although we do desire coming back, and our students have been coming back gradually, as well as taking advantage, the city is always here, New York is here, and many of our students have taken advantage of being in the city to kind of come together, to visit sites, and to kind of just enjoy the experience of being together. But otherwise, these are some of our studios that you would visit if you were here today. Urban design. This is a classroom where the CCP show. This is Kate Orff and urban design in action. This is one of the architecture studios, obviously in a very beautifully clean setting of the end of year exhibition. Typically is a little bit messier, where with more action, but also more exchanges. And I always say that it's in studio that you learn from one another, and you learn as much from your peers as you do from faculty. And so these are just a little mini tour here. This is the fourth floor, where most of the administration is, as well as the heads of all the programs. And we use the space for exhibitions as well of student work, etc. But we try to also invade many other spaces with student work to make the school visible to itself and to the campus overall. And so I think the feeling at the school is often of things just popping up and surprising and kind of very active. This is a final review of the AAD program. And again, I'm very curious to know how this moment of remote reviews, etc., is going to transform the physical reviews and the conversations, and how we continue to hybridize both. We are very aware and invested in supporting our students with career services, from the real estate program to urban planning. This is the Urban Planning Lounge, and sort of finding ways to kind of bring always, use reviews, etc., to bring experts from around the city. That's what's great about being in New York. You just have access to so many professionals that can come for reviews. In addition to these collaborations with institutions around New York, other kind of experiences that the school has a long tradition in is really learning through traveling and experiencing other contexts and cultures through the William Kinney Fellowship Award. And, our students get to travel across all of the programs to sort of incredible places, and then think about what it means to kind of intervene in the built environment in so many different ways in so many different places. And in addition, all of that sort of comes together in the events that we support. Very many public events, lectures, conferences, etc. The school is really a sort of kind of central to the culture in New York and beyond. And I encourage you, if you haven't, to sort of attend some of the events, or check them. They're all online, and they focus from everything from kind of more scholarly sort of conversations to issues of how we construct practice as architects, not only in New York but around the world. And this is some of the sort of events that are left in the semester. Please do come, especially for Mabel's talk next Monday. And I also want to highlight the possibility of engaging with our student organizations, which are many and wonderful and so active and important at this time, whether it's GSAPP X Plus, one of the longest kind of living, let's say, student organization at the school, to Latin GSAPP, who have hosted unbelievable events, to the BSA, that are really contributing in incredible ways. And I know some of you will have met with them in this kind of admissions process where they've been so helpful. There are the student organizations host events, and some of them have publications such as Urban Magazine or QSAPP's publication. And some of them, even if not kind of formally organized, such as the Design-Driven Development Club, are initiatives that students come up with that we are, as a school, are always happy to support. Being in New York also means that you can visit kind of offices, so many different offices in the city, and something we support quite a bit, engage in kind of conferences, and really think about a career trajectory from being a student to being an alumni, and finding ways to tie the two together through the career fair or engaging with the alumni board. Our alumni have been wonderful, especially in the last two years, with the kind of further engagement with mentorship and conversations, and really finding ways to connect with current students as well. And we support our alumni in many ways, including our recent alumni through the GSAPP Incubator Prize, which is a pretty significant prize that is about sort of supporting recent alumni and kind of thinking about new forms of practice that address issues of equity, of climate change, of health, and the environment. And if you're interested in that, you can also listen to the podcast of many of our alumni coming together. Most probably, we will still have, certainly this summer, we will still be in a kind of hybrid mode between the virtual and the physical. In the fall, President Bollinger has already announced that the goal is for us to be quite in person, even though there will certainly still be some dimensions of remote. But we're kind of figuring it out as we go. Probably we'll still be wearing masks, but I can't wait to welcome all of you as much as possible to Avery, and the opportunity to meet with you. It's a really important time for architecture and for all of the disciplines of the built environment. And I think GSAPP is really leading in many aspects these conversations. I'm very proud to be part of the school. Thank you.